This is Covering the Spread. Here are your hosts, Jim Saunders and Dr. Ed Feng.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, where today we are previewing the wild card round of the NFL playoffs and talking about Alabama versus Ohio State with Nick Kostos of You Better You Bet. My name is Jim Saunders. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work over at thepowerrank.com. Ed, the national championship is set. Alabama against Ohio State. We have the NFL playoffs beginning this weekend. It's a fun time to be a sports fan. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It was an incredible game, Ohio State and Clemson. I thought about sending off a snarky tweet about how Brent Venables should be fired, given what Ohio State did to that offense, just like Don Brown got fired at Michigan, guys who I believe to be incredible defensive coordinators, but in this age of college football, they're just getting trashed by better offenses.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's somewhat their fault, but this is just the way that football is going. Nick Saban has talked about this. You can't win with a great defense anymore like you could even 5-6 years ago when he won a national title with Jacob Coker at the quarterback position. You can't really do that. You need an elite quarterback. Justin Fields is an elite quarterback. I'm not sure that he shouldn't be the first pick, as much as I think Trevor Lawrence is fantastic. But I'm not sure Justin Fields shouldn't be the first pick in the NFL draft. And we saw it on full display in that game.
Well, I've seen some early mocks of the 2021 NFL draft, and not all of them have the Jets taking a quarterback at 2. And I'm shocked whenever I see that. The idea the Jets would not take, I'm not even saying it has to be Justin Fields. Zach Wilson, I think, is also deserving of being the second overall pick. I think they're both, if you give me them on a fresh rookie contract versus 1 year of Darnold on the rookie deal plus the 5th-year option, I'm going to take Justin Fields or Zach Wilson every time. So sure. I think that the idea they would not go quarterback there is shocking to me. I don't know. I mean, these people know the draft better than I do. You cannot bet on that yet. The only thing that FanDuel Sportsbook has posted is Trevor Lawrence first overall, which, if he wants the free money. And the team to draft Trevor Lawrence, again, probably free money if you want that. But I think it's weird because Justin Fields was bad in that Northwestern game, but A, his thumb was hurt. B, Northwestern's defense is really freaking good. And C, it was one game. I know the Indiana game was also not ideal, but this is a good quarterback, and he's really also just as a sports fan, really fun to watch. So I think that I'm glad that he did what he did, because the discussion around Justin Fields after that Northwestern game, it was way more negative than I thought it should have been.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was kind of bad, but
yeah.
I mean, the other thing about that game, and which also went through to the Clemson game, was just how dominant Ohio State's offensive line is.
Yeah.
We can talk about the running back all you want, but I'm not going to say his name because I think the line gets the credit.
Yeah.
And I see them doing a lot of that same thing again in this title game.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about that title game both with Nick Kostos and in your Covering the Future, so should be a fun one. We've had Nick on the show several times. Always a fun discussion with him. You can find him on Twitter at the Kostos. Check him out on You Better You Bet, which is on radio.com. We're going to preview NFL Wild Card Weekend and talk Alabama versus Ohio State as well with Nick here in just 1 second. But first, as a reminder, as always, make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well, because that does help us out a ton. We're moving to once weekly podcasts now with the college football regular season being wrapped up, just one game left. Once weekly podcast through the NFL season, and then once weekly from there on out as well. But make sure you're subscribed to get the podcasts right as they go up. Before we talk Wild Card Weekend, we got to go back to last week. Busy covering the past because we have both college football bowl games and the NFL to go through, and an interesting week to say the least.
Covering the past.
So the most interesting part of last week was pretty clearly the Week 17 spreads and discussing motivation, which we'll get to in a second. But first, we got to go through college football. We had Drew Martin on talking about the college football semifinals and the remaining bowl games. Make sure you follow Drew on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. He wanted Tulsa -2.5 against Mississippi State. Mississippi State actually closed at -1 for that game. That was super late movement right before the close. It was Mississippi State +1 at one point, closed at -1. Mississippi State did win by 2. Tulsa scored late to make it a bit closer, but Mississippi State just played well for the first time since probably like week 1 and got the cover and the win there. Drew wanted San Jose State -9.5 against Ball State. That one closed at 9, but Ball State came out firing. They were actually up 34-0 in that game. They won 34-13. So a tough one there. San Jose State had been kind of a money-making machine for bettors all year, but then came out flat in the bowl game. Drew was on Cincinnati +6.5. For some reason, that closed at Georgia -9, but Cincinnati probably should have won that game outright if not for some absurd clock management decisions by Luke Fickell. They did still cover, so Drew got the win there. Drew got the win regardless, but they could have won that game. So a good call on Drew, but did you get to watch that game at all, Ed? Cincinnati, Georgia?
Well, I think I missed the parts. I saw how Georgia won in the end and ended up getting that extra safety, but
if you have a lead, you should try to use as much clock as possible, decrease the variance because you want the range of outcomes in that game to be as small as possible. Cincinnati did not get the memo, and they lost as a result. But regardless, Drew gets the cover there. Drew is in on the over for Ole Miss against Indiana. It was at 66.5 at that time. Did close at 67. Indiana just played really poorly early on. They were too busy complaining about the bowl game they got to care about the game, apparently. They had 6 points at the end of the third quarter. Ole Miss, they did their part offensively, but Indiana did not. Indiana had the Big Ten logo covered up on their jerseys because they felt disrespected for not getting the Citrus Bowl, and then they played like poo. That allowed Ole Miss to drain the clock in the fourth quarter, and the game finished with just 46 points there, so the under did hit. Finally, Drew had UNC +7.5 against Texas A&M. UNC got hit really hard by opt-outs. Some of these were after we recorded. We knew that a couple of guys would be out, but then a couple more jumped ship after we recorded. They were without most of their top wide receivers and both of their top running backs. Texas A&M basically had no opt-outs outside of their running back, so they closed at -10. UNC did play tough early. They were actually leading entering the fourth quarter. They were up 27-10 or 27-20 with 11 minutes left, but then Texas A&M closed things out on a 21-0 run to both cover and get the win there. So a good start for UNC, but couldn't quite close the deal, and Texas A&M did cover at 7.5. But regardless, follow Drew on Twitter at DrewMartinBets.
Yeah,
and
so
you also go ahead.
That North Carolina game, so when I think about teams that could potentially make the playoff next year, I mean, you can just start with the quarterback position. And Sam Howell is pretty impressive. I don't think the numbers quite I don't think the numbers have quite caught up yet, but he's an impressive guy. So when you're heading into the 2021 football season, I think North Carolina is very interesting. They clearly need to be a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball, but Sam Howell is a guy to look out for.
Yeah, this year, 11.1 adjusted yards per attempt. That's really good for a true sophomore. I believe he's a true sophomore.
True sophomore. Yep.
That's really good. You don't see that often for true sophomores. So he will definitely be a guy we'll discuss on covering the spread next year too. Now, Ed, you had some bad opt-out luck because we talked about Florida, Oklahoma, and we knew Kyle Pitts was not going to play. So you had the over here at 70.5. We knew Kyle Pitts would not play. That was factored in. But then after we recorded, 6 more wide receivers. I know Pitt's a tight end, but 6 different wide receivers opted out for Florida after we talked. So the total closed at 65, but it didn't matter because Oklahoma put up 55 by themselves, finished with 75 total points. So clearly a good call by you. Not sure where that would have been had Florida played their guys, but bad luck, but a good result regardless.
Well, I mean, I think every win is some combination of a process and luck. I think the process was a little bit less in this one, given what happened with the opt-outs. But I still think there was a little bit of signal there, right? Because these were two offenses that could clearly get it done. One of them didn't, but the other one was able to score enough points. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised that it actually ended up going over when I checked the next morning. But part of those opt-outs were Florida's defense, a unit that wasn't particularly good to begin with. So Oklahoma really took advantage of that. Even late, they were able to run the ball and still move the ball and score. So, a little luck, but I'll take it.
Hey, I mean, a win's a win. So we'll take that for sure. So a good one by Ed there. On the NFL side, we have Brandon Gadula on to preview Week 17. My colleague here at numberFire. You can follow Brandon on Twitter at Gadula13. Brandon and I both had thoughts on the Cowboys versus the Giants. He wanted the Giants +3. I had the over at 45.5. He got closing line value because the Cowboys closed at just 1.5 point favorites. Total did fall to 44 at close. And Brandon got the win here because the Giants won this game outright. 23-19. The over was close. I was pulling for it. They were at I think 38 points in the third quarter. The Cowboys were driving to try to take the lead late, and that would have gotten to the over. But Andy Dalton had other ideas. Threw a pick, really bad pick. I think he thought it was fourth down, but it was actually third down. At least, by the way he threw it, it looked like he thought it was fourth down. Finished at 42 points. So good for Brandon on that one. Bad on me. And just a bad throw by Dalton, which made me very sad.
I shouldn't have thrown it. I mean, it happens.
It really seemed like he thought it was fourth down, but whatever. Brandon also had a big hit on the over, 56.5 for the Titans versus the Texans. The Titans defense, it ain't great. It closed at 56, but it went way over. 79 total points in this game. Titans won 41-38, so another good call for Brandon there, and we'll talk plenty about that Titans defense with Nick as well. The final one for Brandon was Washington and Philly over 42.5, and we know what happened there. It closed at 44, so the market agreed, but the Eagles pulled Jalen Hurts, so there were just 3 points the entire second half. Not just the fourth quarter, the entire second half. So 34 total points there, but still a nice week for Brandon. But Ed, that was one of the games that wound up being pretty crazy this week. You also had the Bills against the Dolphins, talking about that game, and it was not on the books when we were talking. It reopened at the Bills -3. There was some late news on Sunday with Tre'Davious White being inactive, and the Dolphins closed at 3-point favorites. It was 4 at some books, actually 2. But the Bills played their starters into the second half. They legitimately were pushing for the 2 seed. They were up 28-6 at halftime. They won 56-26, and that was just one of the games last week where we talk about motivation a lot with regards to betting NFL games in Week 17. But the sports books are accounting for that in a lot of their lines. And like the Tennessee game, they were, I think, 7.5 point favorites. Houston had been eliminated the entire season effectively. They'd been playing hard, though. And if you had realized that they were over accounting for incentive, you might have been able to get on Houston there. The Bills game against the Dolphins was the same thing. Cleveland against Pittsburgh, a massive line there. It seems like maybe that's a lesson for Week 17 next year, is making sure you're not overcompensating for motivation when the sportsbook are already doing so.
For sure. I mean, look, the markets are the gold standard for prediction in sports, right? No one's doubting that. But I thought there were 4 games I thought the market was crazy on. Cleveland is a 10-point favorite. Miami is a 3.5-point favorite. Washington went from push type territory to a 6-point favorite. And then Chargers ended up being a 7-point favorite against the Chiefs, who didn't have anything to play for. So the Chargers covered. So markets were right on that. The Washington game was kind of interesting because it landed on 6, which is kind of where the market was at. I think the market closed at 6.5. But obviously, we all know what happened in that game with Doug Peterson pulling Jalen Hurts. I think it's a crazy move. I get what people are saying. Hurts was not exactly lighting it up. I think he had 70 passing yards the entire game.
He was 7 of 20 passing. Yeah.
And I think the bulk of them came on that one pass to Arcega-Whiteside on one of those drives that they did score. So anyways, weird stuff happening there. But those other 2 games, the market was really off on those, right? I mean, really overlooking the motivation aspect. I mean, Pittsburgh not gonna at least try to play, even if they're playing with Mason Rudolph. They were missing T.J. Watt and Cameron Hayward as well. And then, I don't know. I've been talking about how bad Miami's defense has been all year, and the market's going that far without any definitive news that Josh Allen wasn't playing. So. Yeah, I thought it was a little bit of an overreaction. Look, the markets are the gold standard, right? When that market closes, that's going to be one of your best estimates of how the game is going to turn out. But I thought Week 17 was a little bit nuts.
Yeah, just keep that in mind for next year. Try to spot overreactions to motivation because, again, books are accounting for that. We don't want to over-account. We don't want to double count, effectively, with regards to that. My bet for last week, outside of the over for Cowboys-Giants, was the Packers minus 5.5 against the Bears. It closed at 4.5, and there was a lot of buzz around the Bears, which was kind of surprising for me because the Bears have been inflated by an easy schedule. The Packers had a lot on the line. They had a bye at stake. Like, they needed a win to get that bye, and the Packers scored twice late. They won 35-16, so a pretty easy cover there. The Bears were covering for most of the game, but I never really felt in danger with this bet. I felt good about it the entire way, just because the Packers were still pushing. They still needed to push because Seattle was playing well, so I felt good about the Packers the entire way, and I was a bit surprised with the optimism around Mitchell Trubisky. We're not seeing the same optimism this week with the markets with regards to the Saints game, but I was a bit surprised with the way that one went, but I'll take the win for sure. Just surprising to see the interest around the Chicago Bears, who had played the Texans, the Lions, the Vikings, and someone else really bad over their previous 4 games. Like, we had forgotten what had happened when they faced the Packers with Trubisky starting the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the Bears' problem is that I think the defense is pretty good, but they've given up a lot of explosive plays because they rank a lot worse when you look at yards per play, both passing and rushing, than they do by success rate. So, I mean, I still think there's reason to back the Bears. I mean, not that I'm too interested in it, but I think they can be better on that side of the ball than what we've seen.
Right, and they will get tested in that for sure this weekend against the New Orleans Saints. We're going to get to Nick Kostos and break down Wild Card Weekend here in just one second. But first, the NFL playoffs have officially arrived, and FanDuel Sportsbook is making sure you have the opportunity to get in on the action with some of the best possible odds on the market. Right now, new users can wager up to $5 on any team to win their wild card, divisional, or conference championship game at plus 2,500 odds. That is right. A $5 bet on any team to win any game before the Super Bowl can win you $125. Wildcard Weekend is just a few days away, so download the FanDuel Sportsbook app and make your first deposit to see the enhanced odds today. Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa, or Indiana. New users only. Must wager on designated boost market. Deposits are required. Max bonus is $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Or in Tennessee, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Let's bring on Nick Kostos now. Find him on Twitter at the Kostos, and find him on You Better You Bet on radio.com, previewing NFL Wildcard Weekend in Alabama versus Ohio State.
Covering the present.
Let's bring Nick Kostos into covering the spread to preview Wildcard Weekend in the NFL. Nick, you're a busy guy, so I appreciate the time. How you doing today?
Doing well, guys. We're at the home stretch here for all of us. Well, Jim, I think for you it's different because I got to tell you, I feel like I kind of want to be like your life manager because I feel like you do too much. Like, we got to scale your workload down a little bit because you got all over the NASCAR stuff. You're on everything, man. For me, my life's going to get a little easier in a month's time. For you, we got to get Jim some rest, some well-needed R&R here. So I'm grinding for another month, and then I think for a lot of us in the space, life gets a little easier once football ends. Maybe not for my man Jim Sonis, but certainly for me. So another month for me.
NASCAR's easy. NASCAR's easy. It's one thing to break down per week. Like, if you had one NFL game per week, it'd be fine. You wouldn't stress about it. If you have one NASCAR race to break down, you're fine. So NASCAR is actually not a big burden. I consider today, Monday, through start of baseball season to be my off season. Despite NASCAR being there, like, I live a great life for the next 3 months. If we had a vaccine, it'd be a better month, but whatever. I can live with it for sure. So I'm actually in my off season. I'm good. I'm grand. You are not quite there yet, though. It's a busy time for you.
But I'll tell you,
it shows you how much Jim Sonis works, right? Like, I feel like a load has been lifted this week because I don't really need to deal with college football. It's one game,
right?
Got to take, So, but Nick, I mean, you're definitely into all the NFL and looking forward to talking about that all today.
Yeah. So the fact that I don't have to handicap 16 NFL games. Like, and it's like the amount of thought that goes into, you guys know this because you guys do it too. The amount of thought that goes into this, like to every game that gets played, is like so extraordinary. And like, that's not to be like that, like we're like superheroes or anything, that I'm a superhero, but it's just like, it's a lot. And the fact that like we're coming down the home stretch is certainly fantastic. And then of course, then with NBA and college basketball, it never really stops, which is awesome because it's better than the alternative. But very happy that we're now in January for sure.
By week 5, I'm ready for January. That's the point I get to, I'm ready for a smaller slate by that point. So let's dive in here and talk about all 6 games for this weekend, starting off on Saturday with the Colts and the Bills. Right now, the Bills are 6.5-point favorites. Total here is 51. The Bills going to the playoffs on a heater, Nick. What do you see with this game between them and the Colts?
I back the Bills a lot down the stretch of the season, Nice.
And
I'll quote pro sports bettor Rob Bizzola, who was on my show You Better You Bet on Monday, and he's 100% right that the value on betting, like the value with betting Buffalo, is unfortunately now gone. Like I bet them a couple Saturdays ago on the road in Denver, -5.5, like ridiculous line. They win 48-19. They killed them. -7 on the road in New England in Week 16, ridiculous. They absolutely slammed the Patriots, and I bought them at +4 at the very end, like right before kickoff against the Dolphins,
Right.
A bit of a leap of faith there, not knowing how much Josh Allen would play, but then they put a 50-burger up on the Miami Dolphins. Now, no such discount coming this week with the Buffalo Bills laying nearly a touchdown against Phillip Rivers and the Colts. And I'll say this. I don't think I would bet Indianapolis. I don't think I would bet the Colts here. It makes me nervous thinking about Phillip Rivers in the cold, probably having to come from behind here. And the Buffalo defense has been largely a lot better. And I think people will kind of point to, well, Buffalo over the course of a full 16-game regular season, the run defense was not great, but the run defense has actually been pretty good over the course of the last month or so, or 6 games or so. So I think Buffalo's defense has quietly improved, and that really, I don't think the market had caught up to that largely. And I still don't necessarily think it's caught up to it here. I think this is more a reflection of the Bills' offense here. So I don't anticipate this a game where the Colts can kind of roll out of bed without Anthony Costanzo, without, LaRaven Clark also on the offensive line, and just run with 250 yards with Jonathan Taylor like they did on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The thing that makes me nervous about the Bills, I don't expect Cole Beasley to play on Saturday, which is a big deal, obviously, because you want the full A-gun potential, right? The Josh Allen offense here with Beasley and Gabe Davis and John Brown and Stephon Diggs. So I don't expect them to have Cole Beasley. And then Stephon Diggs, apparently in practice on Tuesday, he's limited. He's grabbing his side. He's maybe got an oblique injury. So definitely something to monitor here, where if Diggs is not 100%, I can't advocate laying 6.5 with the Bills here in a spot where I know a lot of professionals are going to be on the Colts, because I think people feel like they have a number edge on Indianapolis here, plus the 6.5. For me, it's probably going to be Bills or pass. I generally like to Wong tease if I can, which would be to tease obviously through 7 and 3. I may end up, guys, breaking that rule. I may just tease Buffalo down to like -0.5 and get Buffalo basically to win the game as part of a teaser leg this weekend. So that's kind of how I see this game playing out. I don't think I'll bet the Colts, but I don't know if I can lay the number with the Bills if Stephon Diggs is not 100% and they don't have Cole Beasley.
Awesome. Let's move on to Rams and Seahawks. An interesting game because Jared Goff has not yet been ruled out. John Wolford had 1 start last week. FanDuel Sportsbooks has Hawks by 3.5, so leaning a little bit that way against the market consensus. What do you think, Nick?
I think that this is the most interesting game of the week in terms of a side, right? Because it feels like the opening line 4.5 was like books kind of being like, okay, let's kind of put this out there in no man's land because we don't know who the Rams quarterback is going to be, right? Let's put this at 4.5 so we don't get burned, basically. Because I think if it's Goff, the number is probably 3. And if it's Wolford, the number is probably 6. So then they put it somewhere in the middle, right, in no man's land at 4.5. And I think the fact that the number has come down to 3.5 to me indicates, and I could be wrong, and pro bettors could be wrong because, not everyone's right all the time, or else, people,
not even you
betting on sports, you'd have a private island, right? I think the number to me now at 3.5 would indicate to me that there is optimism about Jared Goff starting and playing quarterback in this game. Limited in practice on Tuesday with a fractured thumb. It is my expectation from kind of reading all the stuff that I've read that Goff will play for the Rams on Saturday. Could be wrong. I don't know that for a fact. But again, the line moving to 3.5 that's not a John Wolford move. That's a Jared Goff move. So that's kind of, I think, where we're at with this game. I'll kind of give you guys a hot take. I like the Rams whether it's Wolford or Goff. So if the Rams announce today, we're taping this on Wednesday morning, that John Wolford is the starter and the number goes to 6, that's what I think would happen. I think we'd see 6. I would bet the Rams. If the Rams announce Jared Goff is starting and the number goes down to 3, I would bet the Rams. I like this Rams defense versus Seattle offense matchup a lot. And when we go back to the Week 16 matchup, which I think a lot of people will point to, which Seattle won 20-9, and a very annoying game because I teased the Rams everywhere. Like, that was one of my biggest swings of the entire year, where it's a pretty unlucky game for the Rams, where really could have scored a lot more. A lot of empty red zone trips. The Jamal Adams kind of shoestring tackle of Darrell Henderson going into the end zone, I think, really cost the Rams in that game. So I think kind of a lot of people's thoughts are being clouded by what they saw in Week 16. But this Seattle offense is, I don't want to say it's broken because it implies that, like, Russell Wilson isn't playing great. I just think what they're doing is really dumb. And, like, they call it championship football. Like, not only is Russ not cooking, but the kitchen is closed and, like, the power's out in the house. It's ridiculous, I think, what they're doing here. And you put Jalen Ramsey on DK Metcalf. They've got other good corners. You've got a good pass rush, obviously, here. I think the Rams can keep it close, whether it's Wolford or Goff. I think if it's Goff, the number should be under 3. I don't think it will. So, again, if it's Goff and the number's 3, I'm betting the Rams. If it's Wolford and the number is 6, I'm going to bet the Rams on Saturday.
So if you're comfortable with the Rams at 3.5, are you holding off on firing on this line under the possibility you can get it to 6 if they announce that Wolford is sitting? Or are you comfortable taking it now and taking that risk under the chance you might not be getting the best line?
Oh, I already took the risk. I bet the Rams yesterday plus 4.5. So if it goes up to 6, I'll bet them again. If it goes down to 3, this could end up being a disaster for me. But I've already I've already planted my LA Rams flag in the ground. Sure. We'll see how that goes.
Well, I'll talk about this later in the podcast, but I am on the same page with you. So let's go Jared Goff. Get that thumb ready, baby. Let's move now to Tampa Bay against Washington. Tampa Bay.
I don't know about that, by the way, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but if Jamal Adams doesn't play, and I know McVay kind of expressed, McVay's like, I think he's going to play. I don't know if he's going to. If Adams doesn't play, I don't necessarily mind Wolford because at least Wolford can move, right?
Yeah.
And Adams is such a disruptor and Goff can't really move, where if they don't have Adams to kind of like get that pressure, right? And he's their best pass rusher.
He's their best defensive end, yeah.
Right? Which is crazy because he's a safety, but it's brilliant kind of the way that they deploy him. I think it's really smart. If he's not there, I think it kind of opens up opportunities for Wolford in the run game. So I don't want to say that I'd rather have Wolford than Goff if I want to bet the Rams, but I don't think and I could end up looking really stupid for this take, and I acknowledge that. I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world if that happens.
Well, it's not just Goff. It's also Andrew Whitworth, likely back this week. Also, Cooper Kupp was allegedly at practice Tuesday, which would imply that he was a close contact and not a positive test. So I think that bodes well for the Rams. Tampa Bay, 7.5-point favorite over Washington. Total here is 44.5, and we've seen some movement here towards Washington already in this game. Do you agree with that movement, and what's your read on this game?
All right. I don't think I can bet this game sidewise. I don't even think I want to tease Tampa. I think Tampa's going to win. So, I want to say that. I think Tampa will win this game. I think Tampa will advance. But I do think that there is potential here for some major effery. If you'll, I will leave the curse words at the door here. But I think the problem here, if you could assume rational coaching with Byron Leftwich, Bruce Arians in the box, I think you can make a strong case for Tampa here, where if I think it makes sense, and this is not to intimate that I kind of am a better, football mind than Arians and Leftwich. I'm not. But I think it would make sense, right, where the Bucs should kind of do what the Steelers did on that Monday night game that Pittsburgh lost to Washington. Now, Tampa can do it much better than Pittsburgh can, and the Pittsburgh offense completely broken at that point, right, where I think it makes sense where if you want to neutralize the Washington, because this is what everyone's going to say, and they're right. How do you get to Brady? Rush 4, don't have to bring any extra pressure. The Washington football team can do that with Chase Young, Montez Sweat and company, right? Where if you're Tampa, I would spread Washington out, and this would be a Chris Godwin and an Antonio Brown and a Rob Gronkowski game where even if Mike Evans doesn't play, and he didn't practice on Tuesday, it was at a walkthrough, but the Bucs said, if it were a practice, he would not have practiced, where I think you could just dink and dunk your way down the field, and I don't anticipate Washington being able to score a lot. But with Arians kind of being as stubborn as he's been this year, and I have been a critic of Arians this year, this could be a game where they're asking Brady to kind of like in the Rams game, this is what they did. And he was getting like buried into the ground by the Rams pass rush. Now, we know that Ali Marpet didn't play in that game, which I think kind of played into it a little bit. But if this is going to be a game where this is the Arians offense and Brady's holding the ball for 4 seconds to chuck it down the field, I think he's going to get buried. And like he could turn it over and he could put the ball on the ground and Washington's defense could score here. So I can't make a case to lay Tampa at this number. It's Washington or nothing for me, unfortunately, at the number. I wouldn't even tease Tampa, although I think Tampa's win probability is high. The way that I would look in this game is the under. How's Washington going to score? Like, I think kind of like lost in the Washington pass rush versus Brady kind of part of the handicap. How the hell is Washington going to score? Alex Smith did not look good on Sunday night, and I've made the case, and we don't have to like get into that as with me as a Giants fan, but I think that the Jaguars would have beaten Washington on Sunday night with how Alex Smith looked. Like the Eagles had to try to lose to not win the game. Alex Smith didn't look good. Terry McLaurin didn't look good. I know he had the touchdown, but was like really ineffective aside from that. And if we know Tampa's run defense is really good, so let's assume Antonio Gibson doesn't have a great game, then it's on Alex Smith to get the job done. Now, we've seen him get it done this year. He was magnificent. Not great stats, but certainly got the job done and played well in the Pittsburgh upset. So there is some precedent for it. But that was a low-scoring game. I think this will be a low-scoring game. There's a reason why this total's coming down. My play in this game would be towards the under. I got a better number earlier in the week. I would still play it at 44.5. When I kind of brainstorm a final score in my head, I'm thinking something like Bucks 23-14, Bucks 23-16, and I know that 23-14 would indicate the Bucks would cover. I don't feel comfortable enough in that to bet it.
I don't know how Arians is going to get his quarterback killed. Like, I mean, I completely agree with you, right? You have how I forget however old Brady is, but like, of course you have to change your strategy against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Nick, let's move on to the next game. We're going to Sunday. We got Baltimore at Tennessee. Baltimore is a 3-point favorite. Baltimore presents a lot of interesting challenges with their offense. Tennessee's defense is terrible. What are you seeing in this game?
The number of 3.5 I thought was really interesting, right? The opener of Baltimore minus 3.5. I kind of expected this to open at 2.5 or 3. And my expectation was if it goes to 2.5, it's going to go right up to 3. I think it's fascinating that the number came down where it did. And that's like for people, and I know you guys know this, but just for the audience, and I'm sure you guys will say stuff like this, right? That is a massive move to come off of 3.5 to 3, like everywhere. That money came in on the Tennessee Titans here. I'm going to go ahead and plant my flag in the ground here on this game and say that it's not that I don't agree with the move, because I'm not necessarily like rushing to lay 3.5 with the Ravens. 3 obviously is a significantly better number to get with Baltimore. I kind of think Baltimore is going to kill Tennessee. Like, I think Baltimore could run roughshod on the Tennessee Titans here. And I know people will kind of point to the divisional round playoff game last year, and then the win that Tennessee had earlier in the season over the Ravens. Now, a couple factors come into play that I think will make this particular game a little different. The divisional round game last year, I don't want to say Baltimore dominated the game because Tennessee did blow them out, but Baltimore's offensive metrics were sick in that game. They just couldn't convert a 4th down. All the decisions that like could have potentially like gone for Baltimore went against Baltimore in that game, and you give Tennessee credit because the Titans did what they were supposed to do, and they won the game. And then in the game earlier this year, Derrick Henry, I think, heading into the 4th quarter and overtime was averaging like 2.6 yards per carry. And then he really got it going late and obviously had the overtime game winner. But that's a Baltimore defensive line that was playing without a lot of their best run defenders, Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams. I think Justin Madubuike may have been out of that game as well. So it's a healthier Ravens defense. And this Tennessee defense, like, I don't think we can kind of overstate how bad it is. This is one of the worst defenses in the league. It's certainly the worst defense remaining in the play. Out of any playoff team, this is the worst defense. And with the way the Baltimore offense is humming right now, like the Baltimore offense we can count on, and it's funny, right? There are a lot of teams where in the NFL, if they're laying double digits, maybe you don't necessarily feel comfortable laying it. When I see like Baltimore laying 11.5 against a defense where they should score 40, I'm like, yes, please. Like, let me do this because they're going to roll it up. They're averaging almost 40 points per game. And I think actually it might be 40 over their last 5 games since Lamar came off the COVID list. It's an offense that's rolling right now. How's Tennessee going to be able to stop the run? How are they going to be able to do it? How are they going to stop Dobbins? How are they going to stop Lamar in the run game here? I don't think they're going to be able to. They get killed by everybody. And then we're starting to see Hollywood Brown finally emerge. Mark Andrews has kind of been flying quietly under the radar, but certainly capable of having, a pretty decent game here. And then on the other side, we like this Tennessee offense a lot, but again, it's a Ravens defense that I think is going to be different than the outfit we saw Tennessee kind of bludgeon earlier in the season here. So I know it's kind of counterintuitive what I'm saying here, where I think Baltimore's going to kill them, but I wouldn't lay 3.5 as a numbers play. Baltimore -3. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't bet Tennessee. I would not bet Tennessee at 3. I will end up with it somehow, some way. I will end up with a Baltimore ticket in this game.
And regarding the Baltimore offense, you could point to matchups and the teams they've faced in that 5-game stretch since Lamar returned, but this might be the worst defense they faced in that time. I mean, they rolled up on the Cowboys, but the Cowboys defense is just as bad as Tennessee's. So I think that it's justified to feel bullish about this offense and feel good about the Ravens here. Let's move now to Chicago at New Orleans. New Orleans 9.5-point favorite here. The total is 47.5, and this is a big number, obviously, but it's understandable why, because the Bears offense, when they finally faced a real defense again on Sunday, came crashing back to earth and really folded pretty heavily. Now they're facing the Saints on the road. What do you see in this game?
Well, I think it's interesting, right, that this number is what it is, over 9 right now. Probable teaser protection would be my guess to keep this number at 9.5. Can't get it down under 3 with the Saints. I don't think I would bet Chicago. That being said, I don't think I'm necessarily racing to bet on the Saints at this number here. I think the Saints win probability is extremely high. I'd rather kind of put the Saints in a money line parlay of some kind here rather than tease the Saints down here to 3.5. I'd rather tease them under 3, obviously, but I doubt we're going to get that opportunity. The play that I really like in this game, I think this game can definitely go over. I would go over 47. The Bears defense, and we've talked about this a lot on You Better You Bet, the Bears have been an overplay for us over the course of the last month. The only game the Bears had that did not go over the last month was the Texans game, and it took an extraordinary series of events in the second half to keep that game under the total. I think they had 37 at half, and the game went under 46 for the game, which was insane. That was not a fun one for me because I had the over there. So I think the Saints, and keep in mind here, right, the Saints are expected to get Michael Thomas back here. So the Saints are going to have Breeze, Kamara, and Thomas all in this game. And Kamara should be able to go with the game on Sunday, not on Saturday. Should be back with the COVID tracing. So we should be able to get Alvin Kamara here. The Bears defense is not good. And they've been getting shredded, right, by decent to good offenses here. I kind of think the Saints are going to score 30 here. And then it's do I have enough faith in Mitch Trubisky and the Bears, potentially in garbage time to get me a touchdown if I need it? I do. I think the total should be maybe 49 or 50, which I know is not a huge jump, but it's enough where I feel comfortable taking this over. So my play in this game would be over. I think the Saints will win. I would not bet the Bears, but I also don't think I would bet the Saints, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely sounds good. Let's go to the last game, another interesting one. Cleveland at Pittsburgh, rematch of last week, but with a lot of different characters. Kevin Stefanski is out with COVID as the play caller. Pittsburgh's now a 6-point favorite. What do you think of that line movement?
Well, Ed, can I ask you a question as someone
Sure.
that I know is very involved in the math side of this? Because I'm very curious as to the answer. Joel Bitonio is not going to play in the game. We can kind of quantify what he means, right, to the game. We can kind of handicap and say, okay, this player's coming in to replace him. This is how it affects the Browns scheme. This is how it could affect the Steelers defense. So what Pittsburgh's going to try to do defensively. We can kind of have a good sense handicapping that. How do you quantify, with what you do numbers-wise, the Browns not having their play caller? Because I bet Pittsburgh early. I got Pittsburgh laying 4. I feel good about that now, certainly. But, how do we know, what that means? I think it presents, a challenge that I don't know if this is a problem that can be solved because it's unprecedented. So, right. Do you feel confident? And I don't think there's a bad answer. So I feel if you're I don't know. I feel that's a great. I don't know. Can you solve that problem?
I think our best guess is that it's worth a point because that's what we saw the market move. I think it's not really worth anything. I don't really have a way of quantifying that, but Stefanski is a run first on early downs type of play caller, and if whoever takes over says, "Hey, let's try to throw the ball," that could be worth a point. In the opposite direction, it could be worth a point for Cleveland. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think even if they did that, they're still going to get pretty much stomped by a pretty good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So it's a hard thing for me to quantify. Maybe that's a good offseason project for me, but
well, you know what? God willing, Ed. God willing, it won't be. God willing, it won't be an off-season project for you because like we won't have any more COVID issues moving forward. So God willing, that's the case. You'll never have to deal with this again. So I don't know, man. I think Pittsburgh's going to win the game no matter what, whether it's Stefanski or whether it's Alex Van Pelt calling the plays. The Browns are interesting, right? Because the 3 weather games this year. You had the wacky game in Week 17 where the Steelers played all their backups. You had a couple COVID games, right, where the Browns are the Week 16 game against the Jets. The Browns, more so than any team this year, have played like these wacky games where do we really feel confidence collectively as a community in like who the Cleveland Browns are? I don't necessarily know that I feel very confident in that, but here's what I do feel confident in. I think the Steelers are better. I think the Steelers are better than the Browns. So whether the number's 4, whether the number's 6. I would not bet Cleveland. I've got a better number on Pittsburgh, so I'm certainly not going to lay 6. I think if you're going to attack this game, I mean, you could potentially do a Buffalo-Pittsburgh teaser, which is, I know, not a lot of value because you're not teasing through 7 and 3. I think you could put the Steelers in a money line parlay. Like, you wanted to do like an AFC North. I guess AFC North wouldn't be good because Cleveland's in it also and they would lose. But like if you want to do a Sunday money, and I know stuff like this is not like advocated for necessarily, but like just a ways to get around the mess here. Like for me, like a Saints Steelers parlay would make a lot of sense. Money line parlay makes a lot of sense on Sunday. Put the Bills in there if you'd like, because I think Buffalo's win probability is high. I don't know if they're going to cover. I don't know if I would tease them. So that's kind of how I would look to attack this game. And I know parlays are kind of often frowned upon, but listen, with the craziness in this game, I don't know how crazy it actually would be to do that.
We talked about this with Ed Miller. We had him on our show. He wrote the book, The Logic of Sports Betting. He likes parlays as long as the bets you're putting in the parlays are good individual bets. If you think those are good individual bets, it makes sense to do that because you can, increase your margin. So parlays, as long as they are good bets, are not bad necessarily. So
like Steelers to win, Bills to win. I feel like Saints to win.
If you think they're good individual bets, you're good. Yeah.
Like I feel like all 3 of those teams, if I had to bet, I think all 3 of those teams will cover the spread.
Right.
But I don't feel confident enough in them covering to make the bet. But I feel like they're all 3 win probabilities, Buffalo, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, are all very high. So I feel good about like a 3-team money line parlay with those 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I felt the exact same thing about New Orleans last year in this same round. And, that didn't work out.
You got Kyle Rudolph.
I actually had the Viking. Well, I don't think you got Kyle Rudolph. You got Drew Brees in that game because not only was Brees not the best starting quarterback in that game, he wasn't even the best quarterback on his own team in that game against the Vikings.
Yeah, well, I would say you got Kirk Cousins in that game.
Yeah, exactly. Nick, we got to let you go here, but before we do, any thoughts on the national championship game? We got Alabama and Ohio State. Alabama now an 8.5-point favorite. It was 7.5. It's moved to 8.5. Total here is 74.5. Any quick thoughts on this one before we let you go?
Yeah, I guess like if the number is going to be over 7, which it looks like it's going to be, and I would say that right now, and I want to give a shout out to my buddy Colin Wilson, who was on You Better, who had a great point on Tuesday night's edition of our show that I'll echo here, where I think Alabama is going to start to become, when people put in their kind of weekend bets, if people like, let's say, wanted to do like a Steelers Alabama money, I'm not saying I'm going to do this, I'm not, but like if you want to bet Alabama and like put Alabama in a parlay with some of the favorites this weekend, if people are interested in something, which I'm not necessarily advocating, but if people want to do that, I would look to do that now because like Jim just told you, this number is going up for Alabama. If the number's over 7 for me, I guess it's Ohio State, but I'm much less interested in the side in this game, and I'm a lot more interested in the total. I almost don't care what it is. I'm going to bet the over. I think Ohio State can keep the game at least relatively close. And if Ohio State is going to keep this game even relatively close, it can't go under because Alabama is going to score 1 million points. And I certainly think Ohio State can score some points as well. And like we're starting to get some reports trickling out on Wednesday morning that Justin Fields should be good to go. And if that's the case, I certainly think Ohio State can do their part to get this game over the total. So for me, 75. I off air asked you guys, what's it at right now? I don't care. I want the over 75. Right. Yeah, give me the over. I'm not going to shy away from it. I like the over in the national title game.
If we
Justin
get over,
Fields, Justin Fields is getting the best treatment that money can buy for that bat.
Basically a Toradol needle. Yeah, that'll do it for him, like it did against Clemson.
That'll do the trick for sure. That is Nick Kostos. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at the Kostos and check him out on You Better You Bet on radio.com. Nick, we appreciate the time. Good luck to you this weekend, and good luck with all your other stuff going on too.
Appreciate it, guys. Good luck to you guys. Good luck to all the listeners. Wishing you and all the listeners minimal sweats, winning bets, and the absolute very best of luck.
Covering the future.
Big thank you once again to Nick Kostos for swinging by and breaking down Wild Card Weekend and the College Football National Championship game. And Ed, it's going to be a fun game. I know we've talked about this before, but I selfishly like a lot of points. I like to watch offense, and it seems like we're probably going to get that this weekend. Nick said, whatever the over is or whatever the total is, just take the over. Are you kind of thinking the same thing here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I think the championship game should be great. I mean, I think even I don't like anything sidewise, but I think it's going to be a competitive game. My numbers have Alabama by 8 points. And I think I talked a little bit about how much I like Justin Fields. I mean, he's a great quarterback. And when you think about this from Alabama's perspective, yeah, they're the best team, and this might be Nick Saban's best team ever. But this is the first time they're going to step out on the field, and they're not going to have the advantage at the quarterback position. As much as I like Mac Jones, I think he's fantastic. Justin Fields is a better quarterback. So I think Alabama's a better team. But, in terms of the outcome of the game, I'm not going to be surprised at all if Ohio State puts up a big number and actually wins this game outright. So, but yeah, let's talk about the total. So when these are the two best offenses in the nation. I mean, you saw it on the field. You've seen it all year with Alabama, only 31 points against Notre Dame, but they are clearly an explosive offense. Ohio State as well, and what they did against Clemson. I mean, an elite Clemson defense, right? Like this is not like Michigan's defense out there. This is a top 5 unit by every way that you can possibly measure it, and they just obliterated it. So what do you think about points in this game as well? Well, I mean, Alabama's defense is good. They're 7th best when you look at adjusted success rate. They're better against the pass, 3rd than they are against the run. They do have Patrick Surtain, who's probably going to be a first-round pick at the cornerback position. I think that's certainly going to help. But Ohio State's, I just see them putting up points against this Alabama defense. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think Fields is going to be able to throw the ball as well. And Ohio State, I've been talking about their pass defense all season. It's still a small sample size of 7 games, but they're 53rd when I look at my adjusted success rate on passing plays. Cornerback Shaun Wade had a lot of issues against Clemson in coverage. He's kind of gone, before the season started as a guy who was going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. That draft stock is definitely dropping when you look at average of mock drafts out there. And now he's going up against Heisman Trophy winning Devonta Smith. So anyways, I think there's going to be a lot of points. My model actually likes about 78 points in this game. I actually think that prediction is a little bit low because both of the defenses actually rank a little bit better by the metric that I'm using. And the metric I really should be using is success rate, and they rank worse when they look at that. I really think the projection should be like 80 points. I kind of hate this play in the sense that it's a very public play, the over in a big-time game. But I think both the numbers and what we've seen on the field this season back that up.
I completely forgot about Devonta Smith. We had to give Adam Kramer credit. He was successful. He completed his task of getting Devonta Smith the Heisman. We talked with him before the conference championship games. I think Devonta Smith might have been like plus 250 at that point, but he was 100-1 to open the season. He was 22-1 after the Auburn game. Kudos. I think Adam said he didn't have a ticket on him, but I hope he eventually got one just to, get the additional sauce on top of that. So kudos to Adam Kramer for nailing Devonta Smith to win the Heisman there. And yeah, Shaun Wade, I follow enough Ohio State people where they have been basically every tweet from Ohio State fans has been mocking his first team All-American selection. They've just been laughing effectively. So I think they're on the same page with you where they are dreading that matchup with Devontae Smith. But it's going to be a fun game. Yeah.
Well, and it's really tough, right? Because you lose Jeffrey Okudah and Damon Arnett, two first-round picks at the cornerback position. And Ohio State is a program that's been able to just replace guys like that. Yeah. And then now you come to a season where you can't replace, it just doesn't happen every year. So Ohio State's still a good football team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Right. And should be a great game.
Like, credit to Ohio State's defense for getting better as the season went along, but this is a really tough assignment. It's really tough to slow down Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Najee Harris. That'll be tough, but hopefully a fun game coming up on Monday. I want to go back to a game we discussed with Nick for my cover in the future. I do want to go in the same direction as him and back the Rams at plus 3.5. And it's nerve-wracking, to say the least, given that Jared Goff is still uncertain in how their offense has played the last month. But I think there is enough positivity in the news with the Rams for me to jump before this line moves more. Because the good news at practice Tuesday was that Jared Goff was throwing, Cooper Kupp was back, and Kupp is on the COVID-19 list. This makes it seem like it was just a close contact rather than he tested positive. So that's a good thing. I think that means Kupp will be back for Saturday, which is a good thing for this offense. Goff was throwing at practice on Tuesday, and Sean McVay said that Goff was preparing as if he will play. The only negative report around Jared Goff sounded to be more speculation-based rather than strict reporting. And I think that's a key a lot of times, is deciding what is being fed to them by a coach and is definitive and what is speculation based on other stuff. This one seems speculation-based. The negative report on Jared Goff, I think it was Monday, didn't seem to have all that much weight, whereas the reporting from actual beat reporters in Los Angeles on Tuesday was much more optimistic. But I think the biggest positive here, and potentially one that's going overlooked, is Andrew Whitworth. The left tackle is expected to be back. This Rams offensive line is bad. They played better this year than they did last year. Especially Austin Corbett's been really good. But Whitworth tore his MCL back in Week 10. That was their first game against the Seahawks. They won that one 23-16. In the games with Andrew Whitworth, Jared Goff has averaged 0.13 passing net expected points per dropback. It's about league average. It's not great. But without Andrew Whitworth, Goff was at 0.04, which is even worse. John Wolford was at negative 0.02 last week. So if the Rams are confirmed as getting Goff, Kupp, and Whitworth back, and it seems like that's the way things are trending as of Tuesday's reporting, I think this line does wind up crossing 3 and getting to 2.5 or somewhere around there. So I'm going to take it at 3.5 and hope that my read on the situation winds up being correct. I had been burned by this earlier in the year by thinking the Saints were not going to play Taysom Hill. They did, or not going to play Drew Brees, which they did. Right. But I think based on the reporting I've read from reporters I put a lot of faith in, I think it sounds like they're going to have Goff, Whitworth, and Kupp. And if that happens, I think 3.5 is a very advantageous number. Ed, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thoughts, but let's just get away from the quarterback situation for a second and think about the data from the current year. So I look at success rate, I look at points, look at yards per pass attempt, and adjust for schedule separately and combine them. And that's how this team has performed in the current year. And when you just use that metric, my number is like the Rams by 2 points on the road in this game. Okay, so clearly Jared Goff might not be in, John Wolford might be in, but if the Hawks get to be a 6-point favorite, you're telling me that the downgrade from Goff to Wolford is 8 points? That's a lot. But the other side is like, do you really want to bet against Russell Wilson? Maybe you do, because the Rams really have a good defense. The Rams defense has been a revelation this year. Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald turned out to be just as good as I thought they could be at the beginning of the year, but they also have two cornerbacks in Darius Williams and Troy Hill that have played really, really well this year. So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I haven't bet it yet. We'll see. I mean, I'm almost thinking that if Goff doesn't play and this gets to 6, that might interest me more than if it stays around where it is right now.
Yeah. So we've been talking, I think we've mentioned this, but I've been tinkering around with my own model, trying to craft my own stuff out. And looking at that, I have one that weights defense more than I think it should, and one that I think that downplays it quite a bit. The one that downplays defense has Seattle -1, But that's downplaying the Rams defense, I think, a pretty significant amount. And the reason I do that is because defense is less sticky, less predictable. I think that's the right way to play things. If I have this juiced out where the defense is like fully predictable and sticky, it's Rams -3. So if we take the middle of those two, it'd be Rams -1. So I feel better hearing that you have the Rams -2 in your number as being the way
in a subset of my numbers.
Right, in a subset of your numbers. Like, I don't feel confident enough to base my recommendations off of this model yet, but, I can at least take some solace in hearing that you are at least on a similar page with regards to this game if you take the middle of those two numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the markets, other parts of my model definitely like Seattle in this game as well. But I think when you look at the data, like, that Rams defense is really good, and they haven't, I think they're going to come to play.
That's going to be a fascinating game. That is the Saturday afternoon game. The total 42.5. Rams +3.5. My favorite bet for Wild Card Weekend. That is all the time that we have for this week here on Covering the Spread. Big thank you once again to Nick Kostos. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at the Kostos and check him out on You Better You Bet. They're doing a lot of college basketball stuff with him and Ken Barkley. So check that out wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on radio.com as well. Big thank you to Nick. Do not forget to subscribe to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We are back to once weekly shows, so make sure you subscribe to get that podcast right as it goes up. Ed, what is going on for you this week over at the Power Rank?
Yeah, over at the Power Rank, this is the one time a year that I excuse me. So you can get the Power Rank 2020 NFL Playoff Report. So it's the one time a year where you can get my best numbers and my full analysis without signing up for membership, which requires you to sign up for a year and the auto renew. This is a separate product. So check it out. It has all my predictions for Wild Card Weekend. You'll get all my predictions. Oh, actually for the championship game too, but you just heard that because I talked about it on the show. So you'll get all my predictions and my analysis for NFL playoff games right through the Super Bowl. So it's if you've been thinking about maybe trying out some of my paid services, this is a good opportunity to try that out without signing up for the year.
And is that still the PowerRank.net?
Yep.
Perfect. The PowerRank.net for that. Anything for you on the Football Analytics show?
Yeah, I had Fabian Summa on the show, a guest that we had on Covering the Spread earlier this year. We talked about a bunch of the games. I thought his takes were very interesting as well. He actually put a number on the contribution of quarterback versus coach and rest of the team for a couple of teams like the Rams and the Bills, which I thought was particularly interesting. So that should be up by the time this podcast is up, the Football Analytics Show.
All right, the Football Analytics Show for that, and the PowerRank.net to get Ed's playoff preview. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Our DFS podcast is continuing throughout the playoffs. We'll have our Wild Card Weekend preview talking about all 6 games and all 2 slates. That'll be up tomorrow, recording live on the FanDuel YouTube page, 10 a.m. Eastern over there. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your bets, both for Wild Card Weekend and for the National Championship game. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.